The message came through while I was folding laundry, the soft ping of my phone cutting through the silence. We need $3,800 for Stella's baby shower. You know how important this is, Doreen. Can you help out? I stared at the screen, trying to steady my breath. This was the same family that couldn't be bothered to show up for my daughter Sheila's graduation just weeks ago. Not a call, not a text, nothing. And now they wanted me to foot the bill for a lavish celebration for my sister Stella, who had never even acknowledged the countless hours I'd spent keeping everything together. The disappointment hit me like a wave, but it wasn't just the money. It was the years of sacrifice, the countless times I put their needs before my own, only to be ignored when it mattered. I had been the one holding everything together, taking on the burden of managing a failing business, a marriage that was never truly mine, and raising Sheila alone after the death of my husband. Yet, it was never enough. I wasn't asking for gratitude. I wasn't even asking for help. I just wanted to be seen. And when they ignored my daughter's milestone, when my family couldn't even show up for her, that was the final straw. So, instead of sending them the $3,800 they demanded, I sent them 50 cents. It wasn't just about the money. It was about me taking control for the first time. It was my stand, a message to my family that I was no longer going to be their emotional ATM. This was the beginning of me reclaiming my life, my business, and my peace of mind. The message from my father was still on my phone, and it felt as if the words were burned into my mind, replaying over and over. We need $3,800 for Stella's baby shower. Can you help out? The words stung even more than I expected, especially after the way my family had completely disregarded Sheila's graduation just weeks ago. I had hoped no. I had expected my family to be there for my daughter, to show her that they cared, but they didn't. Instead, they'd treated her milestone like it was insignificant. And now, they wanted $3,800 from me. I was tired of trying to please them, tired of always being the one who had to sacrifice, while they took and took. I'd been the dutiful daughter, the obedient wife, the responsible one who kept everything together. But all I ever got in return was neglect, manipulation, and guilt. I had been silently enduring it all until now. My mind wandered back to a time when I first became a part of this story, long before I ever thought about standing up for myself. It was when my family first decided what my life should look like. I had been 22 when my parents sat me down and told me about Michael, a man I didn't know, a man I didn't love, but who could secure our family's financial future. They explained that his business, a family-run operation that dealt with tech products, was a lucrative opportunity, and their plan for me was simple. Marry him, and our family would be set for life. I remember sitting there, trying to absorb what they were telling me. I wasn't given the option to disagree. I wasn't given the chance to say, "No, I don't want this." Instead, I was told that it was the best thing for everyone, for me, for them, for the future. "He's a good match, Doreen. This will set us up for life," my father had said, the confidence in his voice heavy with unspoken expectations. I remember that day feeling a mix of confusion and dread. I'd thought my life would be mine to shape. I wanted to build a career, make my own choices, and live for myself. But that wasn't the reality in my family. They had their own agenda, and I had no choice but to follow it. And so, at 22, I married Michael. It wasn't love, but it was a duty. I walked down the aisle in a white dress I didn't want, smiled for the cameras, and pretended that I was happy. The marriage was a transaction, my family's financial future for my personal happiness. I wasn't allowed to make decisions. I wasn't allowed to have dreams. I was simply expected to play my role. Michael was a stranger to me, someone I learned to live with, not love. We rarely spoke about anything meaningful. Our lives were separate, even under the same roof. I was there to perform my duty, host business events, attend family dinners, look the part of the perfect wife. But just a year into the marriage, Michael died. It was sudden. A car accident, and just like that, my role shifted. I was left with the pieces of a life I hadn't chosen. But my family's expectations didn't change. I remember the shock, the numbness that hit me when I got the call from the hospital. I didn't even know how to process it. Michael, the man I married for my family's financial benefit, was gone, and suddenly, I found myself in charge of a business I knew little about. The weight of responsibility crashed down on me, but my family's pressure only intensified. I had to step in. I was expected to carry the family business, despite the fact that I had no experience, no training. My family didn't care about my grief. They didn't care about the emotional toll of losing a husband I barely knew. They didn't care that I was struggling to balance my new reality with my responsibilities. All that mattered was that I kept the business going, kept up appearances, and made sure they didn't lose everything. And I did. For the next year, I worked tirelessly, managing everything from finances to operations, all while trying to be the mother Sheila needed. It was exhausting, and yet no one ever stepped in to help. My family, my parents, my brother, my sister, continued to live their lives as if nothing had changed. They didn't offer support. They didn't offer comfort. They just demanded more of my time, more of my energy, more of my money. As the business struggled to stay afloat, the strain on me became unbearable. I was running on fumes, and yet I couldn't let up. If I did, everything would fall apart, and my family would lose everything. They didn't seem to care that I was sacrificing my own happiness for their stability. The real turning point came when I realized I had become nothing more than a tool in their eyes. I was working to secure their future, but I was losing mine. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as an asset, a pawn in their plans. And when Sheila graduated, my daughter, the one bright light in my life, they couldn't even bother to show up. That day was supposed to be about her, about celebrating her achievement. But instead, I watched her search the crowd for her grandparents, her uncle, anyone. The hope in her eyes was heartbreaking, but they didn't come. Not a single one, not even a phone call. That was when I realized my life had never been mine. It had always been dictated by their needs, their desires, their expectations. I had been married off to secure a partnership. I had worked myself into exhaustion to keep the business going, and now I was alone, left to pick up the pieces of a broken family that couldn't even show up when it mattered most. I looked at Sheila that day, and something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living for them. I had to make a change. But what was the first step? Where did I begin? For so long, I had been trapped by my family's demands, my own guilt, and a constant need to please everyone. But now, with Sheila's graduation as the turning point, I knew I had to take control for both of us. It was time to stop playing the role they had written for me. It was time to start writing my own story. The weight of the past hadn't lifted, but the seed for change had been planted. And no matter how hard it seemed, I knew I couldn't go back. I had to find my way forward, even if it meant. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. I had spent weeks poring over the financials, trying to make sense of the mess that was now my responsibility. Michael's death left a gaping hole not just in my life but in the business that had once been the cornerstone of my family's wealth. What had been a flourishing partnership, one built on promises of prosperity, was now a sinking ship, and I was the only one left to steer it. The business had always been the focal point of our lives. From the moment I married Michael, it had been our shared dream, our shared goal. He had built it from the ground up, and I had supported him every step of the way. But now, as I stared at the pile of invoices and the stack of overdue bills, I realized that the foundation was crumbling, and I was expected to save it. My parents had always told me that I would be the one to hold everything together, not just the business, but the family. They saw me as the reliable one, the one who always worked hard and never complained. But after Michael's sudden death, their support had been non-existent. It was as if they expected me to carry the weight without a second thought, without ever considering the emotional toll it was taking on me. I was in over my head. I didn't have the expertise Michael had in running the business, but I had no choice. The business had to survive. The family was counting on it, or so they said. I had no time to mourn. The days blurred together, endless meetings with accountants, countless hours spent on the phone with clients who were threatening to pull their contracts. Every conversation felt like a battle. Every decision felt like it could be the one that made or broke the company. And yet, there was no one to help. My parents were still caught up in their own lives, their own priorities. They had no interest in stepping in, no interest in being involved. My brother, Tyler, was busy with his own pursuits, things that seemed to matter far more to him than the family business. My sister Stella was wrapped up in her own drama and never bothered to check in on me. Every time I reached out, hoping for a little support, the response was the same. "You've got this, Doreen. You've always been the responsible one. Just handle it." At first, I tried to balance it all. I would go to the office during the day, making calls, reviewing documents, trying to put out the fires that seemed to pop up every hour. Then, I would come home at night to Sheila, exhausted and irritable, trying to be the mother she deserved, while still worrying about the business. But the exhaustion started to wear me down, the constant pressure building with each passing day. The lines between work and home blurred. I was never fully present for Sheila. She deserved more than what I was giving her, but I had no energy left to give. My family didn't see that. They didn't see the toll it was taking on me. Instead, they just kept demanding more. They expected me to be the one to fix everything, to keep the business alive, to keep them living the life they were accustomed to. But where were they when I needed them, when I needed support, when I needed a break? As the months passed, it became clear that I was in a losing battle. The financial strain was immense, and I couldn't keep up with the debt. I was sinking, and my family didn't care. They didn't understand the burden I was carrying, the weight of it all. They only saw a business that needed saving, a future they had built and expected me to preserve. The worst part wasn't the numbers on the spreadsheets or the endless calls from creditors. It was the isolation. I felt completely alone. My family was supposed to be my support system, but they had become nothing more than distant spectators, watching from the sidelines as I did all the heavy lifting. Every time I tried to talk about my own struggles, about the sleepless nights, the tears I cried when Sheila wasn't looking, I was met with silence or indifference. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at yet another stack of bills, I heard Sheila's voice from the other room, calling out to me, "Mom, when can we have some fun? Can we go to the park tomorrow? I miss you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so consumed by the weight of the business, by the pressure from my family, that I had forgotten to be present for her. I was letting my responsibilities rob me of the joy I should have been sharing with her. I walked into the living room, forcing a smile, but inside, I felt like I was breaking. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I said, my voice shaking. "I'll make it up to you. I promise." But I knew deep down that I couldn't keep making promises I couldn't keep. I was drowning, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was fine. It was at that moment that I realized something crucial. My life was no longer mine. It hadn't been for a long time. I had been so caught up in trying to fulfill everyone else's needs, my family's, the business's, that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had forgotten that I mattered too. As the weight of it all settled in, I knew that something had to change. I couldn't keep carrying the burden alone. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness, my well-being, and my relationship with Sheila for a business that wasn't even mine to begin with. But how could I break free? How could I reclaim my life when everyone else had such a tight grip on it? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew this much. I was no longer going to be the one to keep this sinking ship afloat. It was time to find a way out. Sheila's graduation was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of my life. I had spent months preparing for it, every detail meticulously planned, every possible scenario carefully considered. The dress, the flowers, the small celebration afterward, all for Sheila. She had worked so hard, and this day was for her. She deserved a moment of pride, and I was determined to make it special, despite everything else that was going on in my life. I remember that morning vividly. Sheila was in the living room, bouncing around with excitement, her eyes sparkling as she slipped on her graduation gown. I helped her adjust the cap and fixed a stray strand of hair, watching as she admired herself in the mirror. The joy in her eyes was so pure, so untainted by the worries of adulthood that had already begun to consume me. In that moment, I felt a swell of love and pride, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this day would be different. Maybe my family would come through. After all, they had promised. They had always promised. I called my parents, reminding them of the time, the location my father assured me they would be there. Tyler, my brother, also confirmed. They had every intention of showing up. For Sheila, for me. At least, that's what I was told. It seemed so simple, so right. My family, the ones I had sacrificed for, the ones I had held together through everything, would finally show up. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. The ceremony started, and I took my seat in the crowded auditorium, keeping my face composed as I tried to calm my nerves. I scanned the crowd for any sign of my family, my mother, father, Tyler. I knew Sheila was looking too, but I didn't want her to see the way I was anxiously searching. I didn't want her to feel the weight of my unspoken fear that they might not show. The ceremony dragged on. Graduates walked across the stage one by one. each name echoing through the hall, each moment bringing us closer to Sheila's turn. But still, there was no sign of my family. No texts, no calls, nothing. I could feel the disappointment creeping in, the sense of abandonment slowly sinking into my chest. Every time Sheila glanced around, searching for familiar faces in the crowd, my heart twisted. But I smiled. I had to smile. I had to keep pretending everything was fine, even as I was beginning to suffocate under the weight of their absence. Sheila's name was finally called, and I felt a burst of pride as she walked across the stage, her eyes shining, her smile wide. She looked so grown up, so accomplished. I clapped and cheered, but deep down, I couldn't ignore the ache that had settled in my stomach. The ache of being let down once again by the people I had tried so hard to keep close. When the ceremony ended, I waited in the parking lot for them, waiting for my parents, for Tyler, for anyone. Maybe they had just been delayed, I thought. Maybe they were on their way. But as the crowd thinned, and I was left with Sheila and a few other families celebrating their own victories, I realized the truth. They weren't coming. It wasn't just the disappointment, it was the hurt. I had put so much energy into this moment, into believing that they would finally care, that they would show up for Sheila for me. But they didn't. My family didn't care. And the realization stung more than I was prepared for. Sheila looked up at me, still glowing from her achievement, but there was a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Where's Grandma and Grandpa?" she asked, her voice soft and uncertain. I held her gaze, blinking back tears. They couldn't make it, sweetheart," I said, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to stay calm. I didn't want Sheila to feel the sting of rejection, but in that moment, I couldn't protect her from the truth. My family had failed her. They had failed us both. As we drove home, Sheila chatted excitedly about her friends and her plans for the future, but all I could think about was the emptiness in my chest. I had spent so much of my life trying to live up to their expectations, trying to make them proud, and all they had ever done was take my time, take my energy, take my love. They had never once asked how I was doing, never once cared about the weight I was carrying. Their actions that day made it clear that I wasn't the daughter they cared about. I was just the one they could rely on when it was convenient for them. I realized then how little my family valued me and how little they valued Sheila. They didn't show up when it mattered, when it would have meant the most to her. They only cared when it suited them. That day marked a shift in me. It was the beginning of something I hadn't expected, a breaking point, a turning point. I was tired of pretending everything was fine. I was tired of waiting for love, for support, for validation from people who would never give it to me. I had spent too much of my life living for them, for their needs, for their approval, but no more. I wasn't going to let their neglect define me anymore. I wasn't going to let them dictate my worth or my happiness. From that moment on, I was going to live for myself and for Sheila. It was time to finally stand up for the one person I had neglected for far too long, me. The text came in late one evening, when I was sitting on the couch, my mind still reeling from Sheila's graduation. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner, still feeling the weight of the neglect that had hung over that day. Sheila had gone to bed earlier, blissfully unaware of the emotional toll I had carried all day long. As I opened my phone, I saw the familiar number. It was from my mother. "We need $3,800 for Stella's baby shower. Can you cover your half? Your mom and I will take care of the rest." I stared at the screen, disbelief flooding through me. The audacity of the request made my stomach turn. $3,800. My fingers trembled slightly as I set the phone down, taking a deep breath. It was hard to even process. Just a few weeks ago, I had been left standing alone at Sheila's graduation, and now, my family, the same ones who had failed to show up for her, wanted $3,800 from me for a baby shower. Not a request to help. With bills, not an emergency, but for an extravagant celebration that didn't even involve me. It was as if my family couldn't see me for who I was anymore, a person with limits, a person with needs. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, to scream at the injustice of it all, but instead, I sank deeper into the couch, the weight of it crashing down on me. I had always been the one to give, always been the one to sacrifice, to put myself last in order to meet the demands of those around me. But this was different. The request was the final straw. I thought back to everything I had done for them over the years. How many times had I picked up the pieces when things went wrong? How many times had I been the one to bail them out, whether it was financially or emotionally? My own parents had treated me like their personal ATM, and my siblings were no better. I had worked tirelessly to keep the family business alive after Michael's death, spent countless nights sleepless and stressed, only to have them ignore me when it mattered most. They had their own lives to live, their own interests to pursue, while I was left to handle the messes they created. They had never once stopped to ask how I was doing or if I needed help. They had never offered me a moment of respite. Instead, they saw me as a resource, someone they could rely on when they needed something, and discard when they didn't. But the worst part wasn't just the money. It was the utter disregard they had shown for Sheila. They didn't show up for her graduation, the one event that should have meant the world to her. Not a single call or text to congratulate her, or even acknowledge her achievement. Sheila was the one who had felt the sting of their absence, and I was the one left to comfort her and explain why her grandparents and uncle hadn't bothered to show up. They had been so focused on their own needs, their own lives, that they had completely ignored us. And now, after everything, they were asking for $3,800. It was as if they had forgotten who I was, as if they had forgotten everything I had given up, everything I had done for them. There was no thank you, no recognition, just an expectation that I would keep giving. I could feel the anger rising in me, but beneath it, there was something else, a deep, overwhelming sadness. I was tired of always being the one to make sacrifices, tired of always being the one who was expected to fix everything, and the worst part was that they didn't even see it. They didn't see me. They didn't see Sheila. They only saw what they could take. I took a deep breath, the decision crystallizing in my mind. I had given them everything, my time, my energy, my love, and they had taken it all for granted. But no more. I wasn't going to let them continue to manipulate me. I wasn't going to let them make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. I reached for my phone again, my mind made up. I wasn't going to send them $3,800. Instead, I was going to send a message that would make them understand I was done with their demands, done with being their emotional and financial crutch. I opened the message, and my fingers hovered over the screen. Instead of the large sum they expected, I typed something else. Best wishes for the shower. I attached the amount, $0.50. I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't need to justify my decision. The message spoke for itself. I hit send, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't about the money. It was about finally taking control, finally saying no. They could no longer walk all over me, no longer treat me like I was their servant, their bank account. I had been their punching bag for far too long. As the message went through, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was doing something for me, and I was done. The phone was still in my hand, the screen glowing with the demand from my family, but I couldn't focus on the words anymore. All I could think of was how tired I was. Tired of the constant manipulation. Tired of being the one who always had to give, to sacrifice. I had done everything for them, everything, and it was never enough. They always wanted more. And this time, I was done. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen, and a strange calm washed over me. For years, I had kept my silence. For years, I had let them walk all over me, using guilt and obligation to bend me to their will. I had thought I was doing it for Sheila, for the family, for some semblance of normalcy. But now, it all felt hollow. The reality was undeniable. I was being used. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I would finally take a stand. I thought back to everything that had led me to this point. Michael's death, the family business crumbling, the endless demands they made without ever lifting a finger to help. I thought about Sheila's graduation, and how they couldn't even show up for that. My own parents, my siblings, they were all so wrapped up in their own lives that they never stopped to consider how I was managing everything alone. And now, after everything I had given them, they wanted $3,800 for a baby shower. It was a slap in the face, and I wasn't going to take it anymore. I opened my bank app and typed in the amount, $0.50. It wasn't much, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the message I was sending. I wasn't going to bow to their demands anymore. I wasn't going to be their emotional or financial punching bag. The decision wasn't easy, but as I hit send, a sense of relief washed over me. The weight I had carried for so long, the constant pressure to please, to give, to be everything for everyone seemed to lighten. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't going to let them make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. The relief didn't last long. The phone buzzed again, and I knew it was coming. My family's reaction was swift. First, it was a text from my mother, followed by a call from my father. They were furious, the anger in their voices unmistakable. "What is this, Doreen? We asked for $3,800, not 50 cents. What's the meaning of this? You can't be serious." I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't back down. "Best wishes for the shower," I said, repeating the words I had typed in the message. There was no reason to explain myself, no reason to apologize. I had made my decision, and there was no going back. The calls kept coming, the messages escalating with every passing minute. My family was enraged. They couldn't believe I had done it. They couldn't believe I had only sent 50 cents. To them, it was a betrayal. To them, I was no longer the dutiful daughter they could rely on. But I didn't care. I wasn't their servant, their financial support, or their emotional crutch anymore. They had taken advantage of me for years, and I had let them. But not anymore. I put the phone down, the silence in the room settling over me like a weight. I felt like I had finally broken free from their grip. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to live up to their expectations. I wasn't trying to be the person they wanted me to be. I was finally living for myself. The relief was overwhelming, but there was also fear. What would they think? What would they do? Would they ever forgive me? But as the minutes passed, the fear faded. I realized that I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't need their approval. I was done living for them. This was my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my family, control it anymore. As I sat there, letting the silence wash over me, I realized something important. I was no longer afraid to stand up for myself. I had spent so many years giving everything I had, my time, my energy, my love to people who had never truly cared about me. But now, I had a new sense of strength. I wasn't going to let them take any more from me. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. This was the first step toward reclaiming my life, my independence, and my future. I was finally free. The text message from my mother had barely sunk in before the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't just another angry rant from my family. It was the IRS calling, asking to speak with me about some discrepancies in my business accounts. I froze, a cold wave of panic sweeping over me. This was it. My family had gone too far. I had done everything I could to keep the business afloat after Michael's death, but now my own family was attacking me on all sides. My mother, furious about the 50-cent payment, had gone to extreme lengths. She had called the IRS, alleging that I had mishandled company funds, not just the family business, but my personal finances as well. The feeling of betrayal was almost too much to bear. After everything I had done for them, this was their response. I had put my heart and soul into managing a sinking ship, and they were throwing me under the bus. It was their way of controlling me, their way of showing just how little they truly cared about me. I felt like a criminal, trapped by a web of deceit spun by the people who were supposed to be on my side. I couldn't let them get away with it. I couldn't let them destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. The days following the IRS notification were filled with dread. I called a lawyer, someone who specialized in financial disputes and business law, and explained the situation. Rachel, my lawyer, was calm and efficient, outlining exactly what we needed to do to protect myself and the business. The first meeting was the hardest. Rachel went through my financial records with a fine-toothed comb, showing me where my family's accusations were baseless. It was a relief to see the evidence stack in my favor. The IRS investigation wasn't personal, it was about power. My family wanted to break me, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. But Rachel was a fighter, and with her on my side, I started to believe I could fight back too. As we prepared for the legal battle, I felt the weight of the past few years slowly lifting. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to my family's demands. I was taking control. I had made a stand, and I was going to protect what was mine, my business, my finances, and my future. The legal battle was harder than I ever imagined. My family, with all their resources, hired the best attorneys they could find. It seemed like every day there was a new piece of evidence, a new strategy they would try to use against me. The stress was overwhelming, but with Rachel's help, I remained calm, focused, and determined to win. As we sat in the courtroom, I couldn't help but look back at all the years I had spent trying to please my family. I had spent so long following their rules, putting their needs before my own, and ignoring my own happiness. But now, I was finally standing up for myself. I wasn't just fighting to keep the business I had worked so hard for. I was fighting for my independence, my sense of self-worth. The court proceedings dragged on for weeks. My family's attorneys tried to paint me as irresponsible and negligent. They twisted the facts, attempting to manipulate the narrative in their favor. But Rachel and I had anticipated every move. We countered every argument with evidence, showing how I had been left to manage everything on my own after Michael's death, how I had done the best I could under impossible circumstances. In the final hearing, when the judge ruled in my favor, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. My business was safe. My reputation was intact. But more importantly, I had won the battle for my dignity. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own life. The day I won the legal battle was a turning point, not just for my business, but for my entire life. I realized that the years of sacrifice, the years of putting my family's needs ahead of my own, had robbed me of my own happiness. As I sat at my desk that evening, looking at the court papers confirming my victory, I reflected on everything I had been through. The constant pressure from my family to keep the business running, the emotional toll of being ignored and used, the guilt I had felt for not living up to their expectations. But now, I was free. I had reclaimed my business, my finances, and most importantly, my voice. I was no longer the pawn in their game. I was in control of my own future. And that realization brought a peace I hadn't felt in years. I walked into Sheila's room later that evening. She was sitting on her bed, surrounded by her books and toys, and I could see the trust and love in her eyes. I smiled at her, finally feeling like I was the mother she deserved. "Mom, I'm proud of you," she said softly, her voice full of affection. I was proud of me too. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself, and I knew that from now on, I would never let anyone, not even my family, dictate my life again. The weeks following the legal battle were some of the most peaceful I had ever had. The stress of constantly being pulled in different directions was gone, replaced by a new sense of freedom and purpose. I started to rebuild my life, focusing on the things that truly mattered: my daughter, my work, and my own well-being. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in fear. I wasn't worrying about keeping up with my family's demands. I wasn't constantly second-guessing myself, wondering if I was doing the right thing by taking care of everyone but myself. I started making decisions for me. I hired a team to help with the business, easing the burden I had carried for so long. I found time to spend with Sheila, something I had long neglected. I even took a vacation for the first time in years, enjoying the quiet, peaceful days with my daughter, far away from the chaos of my family's expectations. But the most powerful change was internal. I no longer felt guilty for putting myself first. I realized that in order to be the best mother, the best version of myself, I had to stop sacrificing everything for people who had never truly appreciated me. It was hard at first. The calls from my family didn't stop. They tried to guilt me into helping, tried to make me feel like I owed them. But every time, I stood firm. I had learned that it was okay to say no. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built my own life, and I was proud of it. If you've ever felt like you've been taken for granted, like your needs have always come last, then you know how hard it is to take control of your own life. If you're ready to stop letting others dictate your happiness and start standing up for yourself, then you need to hear more stories like mine. Stories of empowerment, independence, and taking back what's rightfully yours. If you're tired of letting guilt control you, of letting others use your love and loyalty to manipulate you, then subscribe now. Join me on this journey of self-discovery and reclaiming your peace. It's time for you to take the first step toward the life you deserve. Don't wait. Subscribe today and start your own path to independence.